Oh, it turns out we've been recording for 26 seconds now. Okay.
Well, hopefully you can edit this.
I can, yeah, I can. Or I can just leave it and not sound like an idiot. But anyway, here we go. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the world's okayest mountain bike podcast. Kyle and I are somewhat secretly, not so secretly, recording this in the middle of a workday. Although he's driving, so I don't suppose you could be doing any work right now, could you, Kyle?
No, and if anybody from Ecolab is listening to this, I'm definitely not driving.
Do we need to cut that out? I don't think we do.
No, I will be okay. I can't imagine the audience reaching this is going to be anybody that's going to care. But for the record, I'm definitely not driving.
Oh, my bad. I just thought you were. My mistake, everybody. Kyle's not
driving. I haven't drive. I'm sitting in a parking lot eating a cheeseburger, drinking a shake before I drive. Good
call. Well, and I technically consider this work. You know why?
Here it comes.
Here it comes. That's right. Well, look, it's a mountain bike podcast. We all love to ride, but the great thing about mountain biking is it's a lifetime sport, but it's not cheap. It's dangerous. And if you want to keep shredding well into retirement years, or if you're not that old and you just want to get a financial plan together and have your finances in order to set you up well for your future, to afford your kids' bikes, maybe fund your grandkids someday, you never know. You need to let me help you set up a financial plan as your financial planner with Belgrade Financial Services. So if I can be of benefit to you, which I can, whether you think I can or not, just give me a chance. Email me at ksylvie@moneyconcepts.com or give me a call, 573-327-7003. Or just get a hold of me any way you can. Send up smoke signals, show up on a random Saturday to Shepherd Mountain. I am sure you will find me. And let's make the dream come true to make the bike park the new golf course. Belgrade Financial Services is an independent firm not affiliated with Money Concepts Capital Corp. All securities through Money Concepts Capital Corp. Member FINRA SIPC. Holy smokes. Does that even count if you mess up the disclaimer?
That sounds pretty legal to me.
Member FINRA SIPC. There we go. And you know what? I can justify this at work because this little ad read, it's done some good. That's really all I can say, but it's working. So
what you're saying is that you've had people who listen to our podcast reach out to you and look for assistance in their financial planning future.
Yes, but that's literally all I can say about it. Any more might be, I don't know, a violation. So we'll move on and actually talk about mountain bike stuff before we lose all our listeners. So I figured today we'd talk a little bit about some more of the questions we have on our Facebook page. A topic that I did not think would have a lot of interaction that I posted this morning, just a thought. And man, like, people have some opinions, which is fine with me. But what I posted this morning, and I think I posted it on the St. Louis, the STL Enduro page. It wasn't even on our page. Was I listened to a lot of moto podcasts, media, Pulp MX Show, Racer X stuff, Jason Thomas's Industry Seating podcast, Main Event Moto, and all these motocrossers, like, they all mountain bike, mainly for training, which is fine. Like, that's cool. But even the retired ones and some of the current ones, you see them every once in a while, they'll post a video and they're like out in their spandex and they like find a little jump on their cross country bike and they jump in. I'm like, that's cool, whatever. But they all talk about mountain biking. But when it comes to retired racers, you know, Ryan Dungey, Davey Millsaps, some of the older ones, Johnny O'Mara, Justin Brayton, like, it's always cross country and just long distance riding. And I'm starting to wonder because, like, on the Pulp MX show, they talk about mountain biking so much. I have never, ever, ever, ever heard the word enduro or even what we would call enduro described in different ways. Like, even somebody be like, yeah, I just, I climb, but I, really only care about the downhills. Never heard anything remotely like that, to the point where it's been so many years of listening to this. I'm like, I wonder if these guys know about the discipline of enduro, like as a competitive discipline. You know what I'm saying?
Or even if not even enduro, I mean, even just bike parks. So I've noticed that local. Ryan Brown is a classic example of that. Ryan, all but retired from racing and dove right into full endurance, long distance cross country mountain biking. And it wasn't really until even just a couple of years ago that Ryan put away the skin suit and started riding mountain bikes like he's supposed to. And
I don't know. For Ryan, that might be the answer to all this. Might be the Ryan Brown example. Be a short conversation.
But there's still too. So through working at a shop, we've worked with a bunch of different customers that come from the moto background, and there was a ton of guys like before enduro hit. These guys would come in for bikes, and they'd be riding these 100 mil travel, cross country 29ers with 110 mil stems on them. And I'm like, who sold you this bike? Like, why are you riding this? Like, you came from racing moto and riding moto. Like, this is so far from what that is. I was always confused by it too, because it seemed like to me the logical transition would be to enduro and bike parks and featurey, jumpy, big fun trails like that. So I was surprised to see that too. So I'm curious to kind of peel this apart and see if we can figure out why former moto racers, guys that like big jumps and racing motocross tracks, gravitate towards endurance-based long-distance cross-country riding.
Yeah, and I do think maybe the biggest reason is they've done so much of that high intensity as far as the danger level goes and speed that they're just kind of over that. I mean, I think I'm not going to say their name or speak for them, but I can think of someone local that was a lot faster than me in moto, at his peak, and he's done, and he and somebody else, they've done some enduros, on like mellower trails, but they don't really seem to have a lot of interest in like Shepherd Mountain. And maybe it is like they've been hurt so much in the past, they're just kind of like over that part of it, and maybe get the thrill out of just the challenge, like just the physical challenge of pushing yourself for a couple hours. I don't know, but for me,
and to your point too, like you said, is that a lot of those guys, current racers on a team, or current racers like consistently pursuing competitive motocross, I could see cross-country mountain biking being used as a cross-training tool with a lower risk factor. You know what I mean? Like, if those guys are just trying to cross-train and get fit, I understand that. So maybe the guys that retire just don't know much better, and they've spent time cross-training and cross-country mountain biking, doing 100-mile days and stuff like that, and that's just where they gravitate towards because that's what their experience is.
I guess. And, when I got into mountain biking, this might be a major difference. I didn't really get into mountain biking as my first choice. Like, I was still into moto when I got hurt, and then ended up and was moving to Houston right after that. So it didn't really make sense to take a motorcycle with me, being that I was hurt and didn't know, just the logistics of dealing with a motorcycle is a pain. And, having a little trailer or a way to haul it around, and didn't have a truck back then, and was using a little trailer with my wife's vehicle. And, I got into the mountain biking side. I wasn't at a point where it's like, I'm done with motocross. Like, I'm over it. Where I wasn't making a choice to be like, yeah, I'm just going to move on to something else. It was more like I was, for a time, forced out of it. So I was basically looking for a motocross replacement that I could do in the city. And so when I got into mountain biking, you were, this is really how you and I became friends, is I knew you were a guy who knew something about bicycles. And I think I reached out to you like, hey, I'm going to buy a bike that I can ride trails on and do dirt jumps, which now I think about that now and I'm like, I wonder what Kyle was really thinking back then. Because I think
I talked into buying 2 bikes is what I did.
Oh, eventually. Well, you didn't have to. Once I really started, I understood and started getting really jealous of the people I saw on like full suspension trail bikes, out on the trails that I was riding my hardtail intense taser 4-cross bike, which it was so light, even for a 26-inch and stuff, it was so light and single speed that it didn't make a bad trail bike for Houston because it's pretty flat and then it could also double as a dirt jump bike, but now I understand it really wasn't ideal for dirt jumping and it wasn't ideal for trail riding either, but it kind of did both okay.
Right. Actually, I saw that bike the other day.
Oh yeah. Oh.
Yep, and right to the pump track.
Yeah, they just Jim something Toto. I don't know. On Facebook, it's like Toto Vito. I don't know. He I guess he still has it. It probably is killer at the pump track, man. Like that geometry and stuff when the speeds get high. It's that bike's got to be great for that. Anyway, we don't have to get into talking about my old bikes, but the point is, like, when I did want to get a mountain bike, I still didn't want a cross country bike even in Houston. Like, I wanted something I could hit little jumps on and be comfortable and like more relaxed and feel in my hands more like a motocross bike would. And it just does not seem to be the case in the motocross world, for the most part.
Right.
Which is why I thought maybe you're right. Like maybe they were just so in that training and cross country world, road biking, cross country that like that's what you do on a bicycle. Is like you go and hammer and pedal and pedal and pedal.
Right. Well, even still, like I've even still got a bike. I just sold a bike to a buddy of mine recently. Same thing. I mean, him and Ryan Brown, I think, raced moto back in the day. I mean, John was a pretty competitive motocross racer from what I understand. And same thing. I mean, he all he cares about is how fast he can climb up a hill. Like that, he just wants the lightest, most nimble thing ever to do that. I'm like, haven't you ever ridden anything fun? Like that isn't climbing up a hill. But it's I've had that conversation with at least 3 of our customers that I've sold bikes to. That's what they wanted. That's what they asked for, and they all came from like a highly competitive moto background. Now, I will say too, this is kind of interesting. The guys that I know that were very casual moto riders, none of those guys are cross country guys. The casual moto guys are all enduro, trail, bike park guys. You know what I mean? Or even freestyle. I think there's some correlation though between competitive, high-level motocross racing and cross-country racing, like that pushing your fitness, pushing your limit of what the human body can do for distances and stuff like that. But the guys that I know that own dirt bikes and ride dirt bikes that are just, I call them, free riders or just casual moto guys, all those guys prefer proper trail riding.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I think there's something to that is if people who are extremely competitive in moto and have left it behind, like haven't been forced out, but have just been like, the time's come, I'm done.
Right.
They might be over the adrenaline rush part. Like,
right.
I mean, when you're pushing in an enduro race, especially somewhere like Shepherd, I mean, they haul somebody out of there. Usually these people are people who've gone down cannonball, totally blind and didn't stop to look at anything. That's another topic, but a lot of them, I think they are just kind of over like the danger. They're like, they're not looking to get hurt, but they still want to push themselves. And so cross country is a nice fit there. But for the casual guys and people like me, it's like, well, I'm not over it. It's just logistically and cost wise, mountain biking makes more sense for me. So I'm looking for like the same kind of thing,
Right.
which I certainly get, but I don't know, man. Every time I hear him talk about like, yeah, there's a trail and it's really fun down this hill and blah, blah, blah. But like, I'm sitting there thinking, well, you're right. Like, imagine how fun it would be if you were on a bike that wasn't trying to send you over the handlebars all the way down.
Right. No, absolutely.
But that being said, I want a down country bike so bad. Because of the trails I have around here. It's hard to get down to Shepherd during a weekday, but St. Joe Park's no problem. It's real close. I work in Farmington a ton, so. But you know what? I have learned that trail's a lot more fun when I throw on. Now that I have a backup set of wheels, I keep the carbon wheels with just like trail tires on. They're not even cross country tires. They're an SE5 that's like almost 1,000 grams on the back, and then
an Enduro tire. Yeah.
Well, is it though? Because when you look at like professional enduro, those guys run downhill casing tires are enduro tires.
Well, right, but I mean, like as far as a classification of tire, especially from that brand. I mean, they make cross-country tires, they make trail tires, they make enduro tires, and they make downhill tires. Like categorically, that the SE5 is an enduro tire.
Yeah, I would just call it a heavy trail tire on the back, and then a Vittoria Mazza trail up front, which I don't know how much that thing weighs. I'm going to say somewhere in the 800 or 900 gram range, 900. So not super light, but throw those on, a set of carbon wheels, and then with no inserts. Well, I do have a Huck Norris in the rear, which I probably don't even need. Next time I mess with it, I'll probably take it out. Compared to downhill casings front and rear with 200 gram inserts on aluminum wheels, it's a big difference pedaling that sucker around.
Sure. Well, you probably went from a 36 or 37 pound bike to a 33 pound bike.
I think we weighed my bike once with like roughly 1,000 to 1,100 gram tires, plus inserts, and except they were Huck Norris inserts, so pretty light. And I think my bike was right about 33. So, yeah, you might be right. It probably is in that neighborhood. I've been 32 or 31. I don't know. It wasn't as heavy as we thought it would be. But with that full Shepherd Mountain setup, I know it's 3 to 3.5 pounds of rotating weight difference between the wheel sets, how I have them set up.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. It's definitely noticeable, but at the same time, man, you have to do it if you want to go bike parking. Well, if you want to go to the bike park and you want to like go as fast as you can go, yeah.
That's what it is. It is. It's a speed because I've ridden everything you've ridden there, except for one. There's one feature that I haven't hit yet, and I've ridden, and I haven't broken anything yet. But I'm not ever hammering. You know what I mean? Like I've never taken a lap at hammer pace, and I think that's absolutely the difference between breaking things and not breaking things. Is trying to ride light and nimble and just smash your way through everything.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, I've ridden. That's completely it. It's a 5% effort difference. Makes a 50% difference on what you break.
Right.
So anyway, let's move on to. I'm gonna pull up some other questions that we've had and revisit here. There was one I saw as I'm pulling this up. Sorry, I got on a different page, so I gotta go back and find our Facebook page. But I do remember one off the top of the head it was phrased as free upgrades, which, in one sense, I was like, that doesn't make sense. However, now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, so this is something I would call like a free upgrade. Doing actual testing with your suspension settings and your tire pressures.
Yeah.
Because that makes a huge difference in the ride. But it does take time. Like, it's not automatic. And I know a lot of folks are like, yeah, I just set my sag and I go, which that's a good place to start. But you might find that if you actually do some experimenting, that the recommended settings or even the recommended sag is not the ideal setup for you or how you like to ride, like, at all. So I can give you an example. For me, Trek is pretty well like just about everybody else, where 30% sag on a long travel bike is kind of the standard across the board. But what I found with the Slash, and this was true with my old shock that came on the bike, and it was true whenever I threw a Megneg on that shock, and it was true when I replaced that shock with a Fox Float X2. My bike rides much better if I go to, like, and this sounds like I'm splitting hairs, but I'm just telling you that this tiny bit of difference, I can feel it. I feel it every time I experiment with it. Going to like 32 to 35% sag, 33, whatever, just a little bit beyond 30% feels night and day compared to exactly 30%, or like, maybe 28 or 29 when going downhill. I mean, it really settles the bike down coming into corners and you're on the brakes and it's kind of rough. It makes a huge difference without touching any clickers or changing them. Just that little extra 2 or 3% more sag on that particular bike makes it ride way better for downhill stuff.
See, and that's the thing, is that I as long as I've worked in the industry and had different bikes, I still don't have the magic touch to tell what would make me faster. I know I enjoy having a more supportive rear shock, so I run less. I probably run like 25% sag, and I usually will run 10 or 15 psi above what the recommendation is, because I like having a little bit more supportive backstroke where I can. You can jump better. You can the bike is more lively and more playful. But I'm sure that I could benefit speed-wise from slowing it down and running deeper into the suspension. But I don't know. I have a hard time figuring out what I like versus what makes me fast.
Well, and there is a trade-off there. I mean, it makes the bike not as fun to climb. Even with the flip, the switch, you flip like the climb switch if you've got one on your shock.
Right.
That climb switch you're still going to sag to the sag point. Now, that climb switch is going to help you keep from sagging even more when you're on the power going up something steep. But, certainly I have ran my bike with, if I know I'm going for a big ride one day out at like Berryman or something, and it's going to be a big ride, I'll actually add like 20 psi to my shock and go in a couple clicks on low speed compression, and that way I can just leave my shock open and it climbs better. It's supportive because I'm not pushing the downhills or whatever.
Right.
But that little difference can be huge. Another thing, if you have a bike, and a lot of bikes have this, like a flip chip. Trek has the Mino link. It'll change your head and tube angle, half a degree steeper or slacker, depending on where you're at. Lower the bottom bracket or raise it a little bit. That sucker can make a big difference too. I actually did an experiment because I've been running it in the low for a long time. I flipped it to high and went out to Shepherd a couple weeks ago one morning, real early in the morning, for a pre-work ride, and went up Coolio's, and it was nice. I wasn't trying to pop a wheelie quite as often, but I didn't really make any shock adjustments to compensate. because I'm like, well, if I do that and make it sag more, then I'm losing the climbing advantage, which is the whole point of doing it in the first place. And dude, just going down Element 26, a familiar trail where you kind of expect your bike to feel a certain way, I kept thinking I was going to get kicked over the handlebars. Over just a half a degree and a few millimeters of bottom bracket lift, I went home, I flipped it back to low, and I haven't messed. I'm like, well, unless this is going to become a dedicated just trail bike, it's staying in low from now on because it felt so sketchy. And it's funny because when I first bought the bike, I ran it in high until Shepherd Mtn. I got that bike in the fall of 2018, and I never flipped the switch until Cannonball was open. Well, you know, when it was, by the time Cannonball, which was the first trail, was finished, I had ran it in high forever and was totally fine with that. Thought it was slack enough. It was good enough. I finally switched it to low, and yeah, man, definitely a lot better for downhills, for cornering. Kind of sucks for pedal strikes, not gonna lie. You can tell the difference. But you know, there's a free, I guess, upgrade right there, right?
Right.
You know, anything that makes your bike feel significantly different, you can call it an upgrade as long as that is a good difference. So that's where I would say, like, you know, you can start with recommended settings, but just for the fun of it, man, go to a trail that you're very familiar with. And if you're focused on climbing more, try a little more air pressure. If you've got the ability to adjust low speed compression in small clicks, you know, it doesn't really work as well if you've just got you know, you're either in climb mode or open mode. Doesn't really give you the option. But try running a little more air than recommended. Try running a little less. You know, my theory with suspension is not you should bottom out a few times on your local trail or you've got it too stiff or whatever. I don't think that's true at all. If your local trail's super mellow and doesn't have any big hits, it probably shouldn't be bottoming out. You know, like
Right.
you do suspension based on feel and what feels right to you for the way you ride. And, you know, for some people, they like a really soft setup. And for me, I definitely prefer probably on the stiffer side on the fork. And I'm probably pretty middle of the road on the shock. You know, everybody wants it to feel plush and then never bottom out, but that's kind of a pipe dream.
Right. All right, what's next?
Well, I have one more free upgrade that you're going to disagree with. Because the problem is, if you don't like it, it's not free anymore.
I know where this is going.
Yep. A lot of bikes are coming these days with 800 to 820 millimeter wide bars on trail bikes. Now, I'm assuming this happens because the company, Bontrager, for example, they just want to make one handlebar and sell it. And then their probably assumption is the shop or the customer will cut the bar down to where they want it, which makes sense. That's fine. But I still think a lot of people are out there running 780 or more width bars that really probably aren't getting any benefit out of that. They might be putting their shoulders at risk in a crash. They're, you know, smacking trees more than they really need to. So I think a free upgrade is cutting your bars down a little bit. You know, go buy, if you've got aluminum bars, it's not a big deal.
The key phrase there is a little bit, because one of my buddies, and I'm going to call him out for this because he doesn't listen to the podcast anyways, but my buddy Tony just bought a new bike. And so Tony has been riding these same old bikes since 2003, I would say. has never changed a bike, hasn't changed anything. It's like whatever it's taken to keep that thing moving since 2003, he's been on the same bike. And it was a dirt jump bike with a drivetrain, so it was a hardtail 9-speed 1x4 cross Yeti race bike. But anyway, so back then we all rode like what did we all ride? I probably rode 660, 650 bars. I mean that was wide at the time. But like I couldn't picture riding a bike anything less than 750 right now, like 740 maybe. But like I like to ride a 750 to 780 bar. I can't do the 820s or 800s. I don't even know if my moto bars are that wide. But old boy Tony buys this bike and then pretty much just runs all the controls in as narrow as he could possibly get them, and then just chopped them at the minimum length. Like chopped the maximum amount off of each side. I bet he cut these bars down to 700 or 680 or something like that. He sent us a picture. He's like, I don't know why this bike had bars this wide. I was like, Tony, because that's what the whole geometry of that bike is designed around your arms being in a certain position. Like it's a new modern trail bike, and he chopped down his 780s down to like 680 or 700 or something because it wasn't what his 17 or 18-year-old mountain bike had before.
That's a good one. I hope he listens to this. Good old.
We'll see. And maybe he'll never know because he'll never ride a wide bar and never know what he's missing. He'll be plenty happy, which I'm imagining how it was. He was plenty happy on his 18-year-old Yeti for a long time too. But there's better stuff out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've ridden enough now. Like I've ridden spent a lot of time on a bike with 780s. My bars used to be 750. I've still got those lying around as backup. I'm pretty well settled on 760. It's plenty wide. I guess it may be a little more comfortable for me than 750 was when the going gets really intense. But at the same time, I also, I think I'd be just fine. If I bought a bike, if I was buying a bike used and it had 750s on there, I wouldn't fret about it, at all.
No, 750's fine. And it depends on how big you are too. We're both, we're both under 6 foot. So I mean, riding a 750 is pretty good. Is good for us. Yeah.
Well,
if you're 6'3" and have a 6'5" arm span, and wide shoulders, then maybe a 780 or 800 is better for you.
Yeah. I think a good way to tell is to get a hold of a bar of some kind, or if you have like a pull-up bar that goes on like a doorway, sit that on the ground. They're usually double as like a nice bar to do push-ups on. Or if you've got a gym membership, go do bench press, and not with a lot of weight, but figure out the position, not even necessarily where you're absolutely strongest, because depending on yourself and, where your weaknesses are, there was a time I used to do really, really wide bench press, and therefore I got stronger in that position. But what I didn't know is like I was putting my shoulders at risk. You kind of need to find, to me, the golden spot is where do I make the most solid, strongest triangle all the way through the movement. If I go hit a big G out or come up short on a jump or hit a rock that I wasn't expecting, that I don't have my arms so stretched out that, my shoulder's at risk, but I'm not so narrow that I don't really have a nice solid frame to work off of.
Right.
But what you cannot do is just look at whatever the latest trend is, on Pink Bike or whatever. And then just be like, oh, 800's the new thing. So, I got to run 800. I mean, remember when, a couple years ago when I lived in Houston, these guys were running they were sick riders. They were really good at dirt jumps. And they had like slope bikes. They were running like 780, 800 millimeter wide bars slammed, basically flat bars slammed on their slope bikes. Because that was like cool. And then they'd hold on to the things at about 720 with, 4 inches of handlebar sticking out from their hands on each side. Now tell me what the point of that was. other than pure trend or style. You know what I mean?
Cool guy stuff, man. You gotta be cool.
Yeah, you gotta be cool. I'm not cool.
A good friend of ours once told me, if you can't be fast, look fast. And that's my motto for riding moto.
Yeah, you did get yourself a new kit, didn't you?
I look
put a
pretty
picture of you on the podcast Facebook page. All right.
Well, you want to talk about how far is too far when building a kid's bike?
Oh my gosh, I can't believe we haven't even already talked about this. Yeah, here's the question. It's a listener question from a listener named Clinton. I wish Ryan was on here. Ryan couldn't make it today, guys. He's busy, and we needed to get this recorded. Of course, if he was on here, he'd probably side with you because I know how Ryan is. But are carbon handlebars needed on a 4-year-old's bicycle? That's the question.
Yes. And carbon handlebars isn't where it stops. So here, let me put some reference out there, some point of reference for this conversation. So Connor, my 4-year-old, is a very, very, very strong biker. I mean, he races BMX, he rides single track, he rides pump track, he rides bike parks. He's actually ridden portions of trails at Shepherd. My goal for Connor is to have him be the youngest person to make it down an entire trail at Shepherd. And I think we're probably going to do that this fall, honestly. So Connor is, coming from a family of bikers, has been fortunate enough to get set up with the right stuff and get nice bikes. But I think that's the only reason he's been able to progress as good as he has is that, most kids' bikes. So when you're riding a 16-inch bike, you're 25 to 45 pounds. You can't be riding a 25 or 30-pound bike. And a lot of these kids' bikes that you buy at Walmart, even manufacturer bikes, so even like Trek, Giant, Specialized, etc. A lot of their bikes that are 16 inches, they're all over 20 pounds. And if your kid's only 25 pounds,
a Walmart Huffy quote mountain bike, I mean, it's going to be 40 pounds for a little, like you said, 16-inch, maybe 20-inch wheel bike.
Right.
It's steel and the handlebars are upside down and the front wheels facing the wrong way and all that stuff when it gets put together. But
so
it'll be like 40 pounds.
Right. So my bike that I got for Connor, so it's a British company. It's a company out of England, and they're dedicated to making kids bikes. And there's a couple brands out there like that. The one I got is the one that came from England. Fantastic bike though. And they only made the year that we got it, only 5 of these bikes made it to the entire United States, and I grabbed one of them. But it's been fantastic. It came with hydraulic disc brakes. The whole bike done and finished with front and rear brakes on it. Weighed 14 pounds, which at that time Connor probably weighed. He might have been 20 pounds. So now he's 35. But still,
He's had to have been more than that. My kid's like 30 pounds now, and they're only 2.
Yeah, he's a string bean though, man. He's a skinny little thing. He don't quit moving. But so anyway, so even at 35 pounds, he's at an age too where a lot of families who push their kids through bike riding would put their kid on a 20-inch. And I think you're really doing a kid a disservice if you're putting them on too big of a bike too early. I think put them on a smaller bike, let them learn how to maneuver it. Anyway, it might be another podcast. But
lease that bike to your friends for a couple years while their kids are growing up, and then you can get it back when your new baby is bigger.
So now I'm at the point now where Connor could probably ride a 20. And the other day, this is so funny, man. So we're riding around. Me and him went on like an 8-mile ride. We took a little cam for a bike ride. And we get back, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, I want clickers." And I'm like, "You want what?" Because he wasn't. We were inside on the couch at that point. He's like, "I want clickers." I'm like, "What do you mean clickers?" He's like, "I want clickers for my bike. Click, 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 pedal, 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 click, click." And I'm like, "Oh man, the homeboy wants shifters. He wants a gear set." So. And that was always kind of part of the plan. So the bike we got is set up with a cassette, set up with a cassette driver, through axle, trailer hanger, the whole deal, through frame or cable routing goes through the frame and everything like that for a trailer. So anyway, I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to put together some stuff for his birthday coming up. So, but the thing is that I didn't want to tack on a bunch of weight. Now the other neat thing is that when you're running a 16-inch wheel, you don't need an Eagle drivetrain. It probably wouldn't even fit. So, and neither would 11-speed. So really, you can utilize some really neat older parts and get like super high brand, super high level, high premium pro level parts that are 7 to 8 years expired and nobody's using anymore. So I picked up an XX carbon SRAM shifter to go with a SRAM Force carbon derailleur, which is like an extra short cage derailleur, and an 1126 SRAM red cassette. So that's the same technology that they use when they built their new XX1 and AXS cassettes, where it's just one big piece of billet machined. All the gears built and machined out of one big piece of billet. It's really neat. And so the whole cassette weighs like 130 grams, and the rest of the stuff's all carbon. And then the other side of that too is that the bar that came with the bike is just not quite enough rise for him now because he is getting a little bit taller. So I wanted to put a bar on there, but it's even to buy an aluminum bar. Not many aluminum bars, modern aluminum bars, have the rise narrow enough to where I could cut them down to 500 or 520, which is probably what I'm riding. He's riding 480s now. So even if I were to buy a modern aluminum bar, it wouldn't matter because I couldn't run the controls narrow enough in order to get the bar as short as they need to be. So back in the day, carbon bars, when they first came out, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, they only made them up to like 650, 660. But because of that, the rise on the bar on those old carbon bars was super narrow. So you could find a super narrow rise carbon bar, which I did for like $35. I bought it from Canada, and it's an old Bontrager carbon bar that's got like a 35-degree rise on it, a 35 mil rise. So I'm stoked about it. So Connor's going to put like maybe 500 grams on his bike total and end up with a 10-speed drivetrain and front rear disc brakes.
So really, I'm making fun of you because when you think carbon bar, like what you think is super expensive for gram weenies. But in this case, when it comes to kids' bikes, like you're basically getting old because, bikes have gotten bigger and bigger in general, and the way we ride them has changed. You're basically getting old cross-country parts that work really well for new kids' bikes.
Correct. Yeah. So in my case, it's actually a road cassette and road derailleur with an old 2x-style 2x10 10-speed shifter, and then an old cross-country race handlebar that just was all perfect. That's the neat thing, is that all that stuff from back in the day that we used to ride on expensive 26-inch bikes is totally 100% useless in our market and for adults to ride. But for kids, it's perfect because there's been high-level, pro-level components since the onset of mountain biking. You just got to find stuff that works. And so, like, you better believe that I've been hunting for an old carbon-specific mountain bike from 26-inch mountain bike that I wanted back in the day that I couldn't afford. And as soon as I find the right one in a small or extra small frame, I'm just going to buy it and sit on it because when he turns 10 and is ready, 10 or 11, and he's ready for a 26-inch mountain bike, I'm not going to spend $4,000 on a new kid's bike, but I'll spend $500 or $800 on an old, $6,000 bike from 15 years ago. And, it's all stuff that's serviceable. Make sure it's all Fox or RockShox. But I mean, you can utilize some of that really high-end old school stuff that fits a kid perfect still.
Kyle, you are on to something here. You could definitely make some side money. I guarantee you there's people listening to this that would be willing to pay you to do this for their own kids' bikes for a decent fee. Because the way you're doing it, the actual bike itself doesn't actually end up being that expensive for what you're getting. So you could charge an extra, even if they didn't have you put it together, just to source it, just to say, this is what we need. Here, I found it here. Buy this, like basically a consulting fee, right?
Yeah.
You should do it for me, and then I'll promote it on a podcast. That'll be my payment.
Right. No, fair. And I'm doing it right now. So I've got a buddy of mine, same thing. He sent me like 3 kids bikes that he's looking at. He's like, hey, I'm looking at these kids bikes, and they're all like $800 kids bikes, but they're all 30-pound, $800 kids bikes. Because like no bike brand out there aside from like some of the big dedicated kids bike brands like Spawn and Little Shredders and Early Riders. I mean, those guys make legitimate kids bikes. That's all they make. But like all the big brands, nobody really makes a proper high-end bike with really pro level components that you can get into it. And if you do, even from those other brands, you're still spending $2,000. So he sent me these like $1,000 or these $800 kids bikes, and I'm like, man, you could, but that's still a hardtail, and it's still going to be a 30-pound bike. Whereas if we started looking at old Gary Fisher's, old Treks, old Specialized, he's a Specialized guy, so I'm trying to help him find an old carbon Specialized 26-inch 120 mil trail bike. And if you look for them, you can get them for under $1,000. And really, to buy it, all you would do is you would buy it, put a shorter stem on it, put a little wider bar on it, and then put whatever modern drivetrain you can put on it. So for a kid, that would be a SRAM SX drivetrain, full drivetrain and everything. You're like $300. And now he's got a 1x12 Eagle drivetrain on a 26-inch carbon bike that's going to feel like an absolute shredder for him. And, he gets to ride a super premium top-end build for what you would have paid for a new bike. Now, my boss would hate me to say that you should buy your kids' bikes used, but I mean, it's kind of the market that we're in, is that unless you're really ready to spend the big bucks on an old kid's bike, it's still, at least once you get into that range. If you're still a kid still on a 16-inch to a 20, you still got to buy a nice kid's bike.
Right. Interesting. Well, I would totally, like, seriously, if I was in the position, my kids are still too small, they're only 2 in a couple months, but like, I would totally, for me, it'd be worth it to pay you $50, $100 just to get the list of what I need and help me find it. Much less put it there. So that's not something I would have ever thought to do. All I know is I saw you were looking for a carbon bar for.
Well, that's the cool thing. So, I mean, from being creative and having a couple connections, a couple good buddies that traded some parts around, I mean, my kid's going to end up with an essentially what would have been $800 MSRP for cassette shifter derailleur chain. I'm going to be like, I don't know, $120 into an entire drivetrain that's in great condition. It's just old, outdated technology that we can't use.
Gotcha. Well, yeah. So what did we cover on this already? We covered, what did we start with? We did some free upgrade talk. We talked about why don't more motocrossers get into the type of riding we like.
We talked about tires again, go figure.
What's that?
We talked about tires again, go figure.
We're always going to talk about tires every single episode. One of these days, I'm going to do the full long-term review on the dissector and the Assegai. Spoiler alert: the dissector sucks. Well, at least it sucks for hardcore down. There's a reason you don't see that dissector on anybody's bike on the EWS or World Cup circuit. There's good reason for that. Assegai's pretty good, but it's not the game changer I thought it was gonna be. I assumed it would just be like this unreal experience, but it's good, but it's not life changing. I've been just as happy on other front tires. But that's not today. And we need to go ahead and wrap it up because I've got to edit out several minutes of my phone ringing and messing up anyway. I want to give people a chance to listen to the whole thing. So, yeah, covered some good ground. I wish Ryan could have been with us, but we'll get him back on the next one. And thanks for listening, everybody. Please email us at okayest, OKAYEST, mtb@gmail.com. Like our Facebook page. You can always send us messages if you've got suggestions or questions. We're certainly open to that. Helps us have content. I mean, we just do this for fun. Yes, I read my ad. Yes, I'm dead serious. I would love to help any of you with a financial plan or investments, whatever you need. But ultimately, we do this podcast just because we like talking about this stuff. And we will be, unless plans change, right now the current plan is that both Kyle and I will be shuttling at Shepherd Mtn on this Saturday, July 24th. And if Kyle's not there, I will probably still be there anyway.
Yeah, come sit with us. Come sit with us in the shuttle. Let's talk some bike stuff. Let's talk kids' bike stuff or tires. I guess we can talk about tires.
We're going to talk about, it's always going to come around to tires. Well, look, it makes sense. Tires are the only thing that connects your bike to the ground. I don't know what else to say on that one. And man, there's still a lot of tickets left for this Saturday. It's so weird how that works. You know, last Sunday we had all that rain and stuff in the forecast, and it like sold out. And apparently it was really good, even though there was water. I asked somebody yesterday who was down there, saw Devin Jarrett at the pump track, and I asked him how it was. He's like, honestly, it was great. He's like, there was water just running down the trail, but it wasn't muddy. It was just like water on top of hard packed trail.
That's awesome.
So that is awesome. I'm stoked. All right. Well, thanks for doing this, Kyle. I hopefully all this recordings end up the way I want, even with all the mess up parts.
Yeah, hopefully you can cut it.
All right. See you, bud.
See ya.